Father God, thank you so much for this beautiful Sabbath day you've blessed us with. And thank you so much for bringing Dr. Howe here to share so much information with us. Lord, you said in your word that your people die from lack of knowledge, and that has multiple meanings. And I believe that our health is one of them. We are just not taught things we need to know. So thank you for teaching us today. I pray that you would put your words in his mouth and that they would bless our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So I thought I'd talk this afternoon about a Maine woman, a good Maine woman. You know what they say, a good Maine woman will give you a warmth in the winter and shade in the summer. That's not the kind of good Maine woman I'm talking about, though. This is a woman who's very near and dear to our church. That's Ellen White. And she was born, as you know, in Maine, right in Gorham, and grew up here and lived in Topsom, right close to where I live for a while. And sometimes we as Adventists, we get a little bit hesitant about mentioning her or her influence on our lives or on our church. And I would like for you to rethink that, because her writings are an incredible source of information. Whether you're an Adventist or not makes no difference. I tell my patients, I say, read the book Ministry of Healing. And it's online, and so if anyone wants to look it up, you can just look up Ellen White, Ministry of Healing, you can get it. And if you don't want the religious parts, no problem, just skip that and go to the part on diet. Or another one is flesh as food. Now those are really interesting. But a little bit of a story, okay? My mother, who was a registered dietitian, using the writings of Ellen White and the work of Nathan Pritikin, held a program in the spring of 1978. Now, you spoke this morning about antiques. This dates me, okay? It was a 2-week program, and she had people come to our home, and they ate 2 meals a day, and they were encouraged not to eat the third one when they went home, and to learn about a diet to reverse coronary artery disease. Now, I told you earlier today about a man that I worked with, and we reversed his coronary disease. Before I left for medical school in the early summer of 1978, my mother gave me a copy of that book, Ministry of Healing, by Ellen White, and she encouraged me to read it, which I did. And some of what that book said was supported by science then, and some of it wasn't. And so I got out to Loma Linda, where I took medical school. And while I was there, in the first several weeks of my training, there were some professors who openly poked fun at what Ellen White said. Here it is, an Adventist school, and here they are, they're poking fun at what she said. And I can tell you later what they were poking fun at if you're interested. They said her writings were not in accordance with science and not very trustworthy. Well, it wasn't until January 1985, okay, so that's 7 years later, that the first article came out in the medical literature showing that if you lower cholesterol, you can lower your risk of developing coronary artery disease and even show some reversal. I'll never forget the grand rounds that I went to where they presented that article. There was a bunch of argument. The surgeon said, there's no way you can reverse those narrowed arteries. They're calcified. Diet won't have anything to do with it, and certainly medication won't. Well, it wasn't until, let's see, I have the date here, 1998, that Dean Ornish proved that with careful diet, those hardened arteries that were narrowed could be opened again. And his articles were published in Journal of American Medical Association, in New England Journal of Medicine, and in Lancet, the top medical journals in the world. And he showed unequivocally that coronary artery disease can be reversed. Well, what happened between 1978, when my mother, reading the writings of Ellen White, reversed coronary artery disease, and 1998, when it was proven? What happened is science had caught up with the writings of Ellen White. In 2005, the China study, published by T. Colin Campbell, was written. And some years later, T. Colin Campbell was speaking with an Adventist audience. And he said the following, and I'm quoting, "I am convinced that almost 100% of what Ellen White has said on health is now fully supported by science. My only question is, why have her books been on the shelf for so long?" Why indeed? What had happened in those 20 years between when I started medical school and when Campbell wrote that? Well, what had happened is science had started to catch up with, as I mentioned, inspiration. And I often think of those professors at Loma Linda. They're dead now. What would they say today? It reminds me of that Bible text, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Be careful. You know, I have a book in my library. It's entitled Acquired or Inspired. It's written by a physician in Australia. And what he did is he looked at Ellen White's writings and compared them to science. And he wanted to know whether or not science supported what she had to say. And he found out that he also looked at some of her compatriots, Kellogg, Graham, and others. And he found out that she was right, according to science, 78% of the time. Now, this was in 1990 or thereabout. And so inspiration was right according to science 78% of the time. Kellogg and the others were right 35% of the time. And then he took that information and he asked a statistician to look at it and see what the chances were that she was right 78% of the time and they're only 35%. What's the chance that she'd be right that much more than twice? They said it's 1 in 10 million that this happened by chance. But then he said, well, that's only 78%. Inspiration should be better than that. And so he looked back to 1950 and looked at medical science and her writings in 1950. And she was right 50% of the time. Oh. Then he said, well, time's gone by, and this was around the year 2000, so 10 years after he published his work. And by 2000, she was right about 90% of the time. Well, what's happening? Science is very good, but we miss the mark, and we do this. And gradually we get honed in and get it right, but we miss the mark. Inspiration isn't like that. And I just want to submit to you that it's worthwhile rereading those books with an eye towards science, which is getting better. And any areas where she disagrees with science, just hold it, think about it, but be careful. Now, I'd like to have you look at just a few things with me, and I'll read what she says about it, and then we're going to look at the science, okay? Just to sort of get you on track. Just 4 things, and we may only do 3 of them. We'll see how the time goes and how many of you fall asleep. Scott tells me that Everyone falls asleep in his lectures, and I tell them if they fall asleep, that's good. It's a Sabbath rest. So everybody needs it, right? So the first one is sugar. And she says this, very simply, sugar clogs the system. It hinders the working of the living machinery. Okay? Simple. Sugar clogs the system. Well, let's look at that for a moment. Is sugar good for you or bad for you? Saying sugar is bad for you is like saying gas is bad for your car. Sugar is what your body runs on. Ask any diabetic that's type 1. If their sugar goes too low, they can't even function. They run out of gas, okay? But anyone here that's a mechanic? Okay, you're a mechanic. You've worked on lawnmowers, right? Okay. What if the fuel mixture is too rich? Does it run well? It runs rough, blows smoke and all that. That's what happens to us if our sugar gets too high. Okay? If we keep the sugar just level, it runs great. You don't want it too lean, you don't want it too rich. You want it just same thing with our body. Sugar is not a toxin. It's fuel for your body. But the key is to get the sugar at the right level, at the right amount. One of my sons likes to run long distance. And when I say long distance, I don't mean 20 miles. He goes and runs 50 or 100 miles. He held the record for the 100-mile wilderness for a while, the fastest transit. And he ran the Pineland 50 here in Maine. And when he was done, he came back and he said, "Well, Dad, you're not going to like what I did." I said, "Well, what'd you do?" He said, "Well, they had an aid station every 8 miles. And so I'd stop at the aid station and I'd have 2 cookies and a glass of Gatorade." I said, "I don't have a problem with that because you burned those cookies long before you got to the second aid station." Again, what we're doing is matching fuel and burn, right? And so that's not a problem. The problem is we have the sports drink while we watch sports. Trouble. Well, what kind of trouble? Well, let's talk about it. There is a process in the body called glycation. We have another term for it. It's called advanced glycated end products. But it's advanced glycated end products come from glycation. So I'll just put this word up here, advanced glycated end product, or we abbreviate it AGEs. Well, what is that? The easiest way to describe it is to think about diabetics. Anyone here a diabetic? Okay, we got a diabetic or two. When you go to see your doctor, what do they measure? Hemoglobin A1C. Okay, well, what is that? Yeah, what is hemoglobin A1C? Well, you have red cells. There's your red cell. And we say it's glycated when sugar is attached to it. Okay? Specifically, when sugar is attached to the hemoglobin. And that process of attaching sugar to hemoglobin is irreversible. Once the sugar is attached to the hemoglobin, it's attached to for the life of the red blood cell. So a red blood cell lives for about 3 months. And so you go in to see your doctor about every 3 months, and they measure this. And they can say, well, your A1C is 8. And with an A1C of 8, I know that your average blood sugar has been 180 or whatever. If you have a hemoglobin A1C of 5, then he knows that your average blood sugar has been normal. So it's a way of figuring average blood sugar based on what percentage of the red cells are tagged with sugar. But what does that really mean? Well, when you tag hemoglobin with sugar, you change its structure. It becomes stiffer. You say, well, so what? Well, capillaries that red cells flow through are about 3 to 4 microns in diameter, whereas red cells are about 7 to 8 microns in diameter. All right, so how are you going to get a red cell that's 7 to 8 microns in diameter through that capillary?
Folding it like a taco.
You're going to squish it down, flatten it out, is that a design flaw? No, that facilitates surface contact between the capillary and the membrane of the red cell and facilitates oxygen delivery and CO2 uptake. It's a great design, unless the red cell is stiff. And what actually happens when you attach sugar to the red cell, it makes it hard for them to flow through. How are you going to get them through if they're stiff? More pressure, exactly. And so many of my diabetics come in, their blood pressure's a little bit up. And so I say, well, I bet your A1C's up too. Because high glycation of red cells causes the body to have to work harder to push them through. But that's not the only thing that's glycated when you have high levels of sugar. So is the protein in the capillary basement membrane. Now the red cells are stiff, and so are the capillaries. And what did Ellen White say? Sugar does what? Clogs the system. Could you have chosen a better word? No. In fact, all of the complications of diabetes have to do with this problem, impaired blood flow, from sugar attached to everything. Not only red cells and capillary basement membrane, but it attaches to fats in our body and stiffens them so they don't work as well. And it attaches to DNA too. And what if your DNA is stiff? Well, then there are going to be more mutations, which is why diabetics, particularly that aren't well controlled, have double the risk of cancer and double the risk of dementia and double the risk of heart attacks, all from this process of age product formation. Anyone here need reading glasses like I do? What's that from? Glycation. That's stiffening of the lens so you can't bring things into focus as well. And diabetics have that, and they have cataracts more, but we get cataracts even if we're not diabetics. One of the major causes is glycation. And then there's high blood pressure, glycation. And then there's heart failure. One of the causes of heart failure is stiffening of the heart, glycation. Isn't that interesting? Age products age you. And one of the best ways to avoid that is to make sure that if you have a dessert, you have one that's high fiber. There were two of them that I saw. There were others I saw, but two that were just fine. One is dates with peanut butter. Why? Because dates have a glycemic index of 42. That means the sugar is absorbed into your body much, much slower than pure sugar because of all the fiber in the dates. So eat dates with abandon if you need the calories, because that won't push your blood sugar up. The other one I saw out there, it was oats rolled in something. I don't know what they were sweetened with, but oats are very, what's that? Peanut butter, oats, and?
I had figs in there.
Figs?
I had some pecans.
And pecans. That was a great dessert. Tasted great. I tried one because I thought it would be a good illustration, and no other reason, right? No. They tasted great, and they were high fiber, and you won't absorb the sugar that fast. And what did your mother say? Finish your meal before you eat dessert. Why? Because if you have it at the end of the meal, you have the fiber from the rest of the meal that slows the absorption of the sugar. And then you don't get high blood sugars and high tissue sugars and high glycation. So it's really important to understand this. The worst thing that you can do is to have a soda between meals or even juice between meals because you absorb that quickly, your blood sugar goes up, and you get more age product formation. So sugar clogs the system. Any questions? Yes.
Deferring to me, I'm shocked.
I'm just wondering if you're gonna ask my question.
It might be. Sugar's the fuel of the body, but there's unleaded, there's premium, there's diesel. So cane sugar, unrefined cane sugar, maple syrup, is there a gradient of bad?
Great question. And was that your question too? Wonderful.
Throw in,
You live together, do you?
honey,
Yeah.
coconut, palm sugar, all of
Yeah.
the ingredients.
So first of all, date sugar is just dried dates ground up. So that has all the fiber in it. The sugar becomes progressively more able to cause problems as you remove the fiber from it. So honey will do the same thing as pure sugar. It's sweet. It has a little more fructose, but it'll still do the same thing. And maple syrup, it does have some calcium in it, but maple syrup will do the same thing. So when you have your maple syrup, have it on high fiber waffles and have a little nut butter with it. That slows the absorption, keeps it from going too high, and don't float the waffle in it. Yeah. My son I have a son that lives in New Hampshire, and he made 23 gallons of maple syrup this year, and he's not planning on selling it. I said, you're not going to eat all that? Oh, no, he said, I give it away. I said, well, only give it to your enemies. Actually, maple syrup's great, and so are the other forms of sweetness, but be careful with them. Be thoughtful is probably a better term. And don't have sweets between meals. That's when they're most tempting and the most harmful. And anytime you can raise the fiber in that dessert and lower the sugar and still have, one thing that you'll find if you're a cook is if you put the sugar on the outside of it, what touches the tongue first is what tells you it's sweet. And so the total sweetness you can cut by 50, 60% if you just coat it and keep the sugar in it lower. It's kind of fun. And whenever you can, use dates to sweeten. My wife and I make an ice cream, a carob ice cream, or if you're not a purist, you can make it out of chocolate, but we use carob. Sweet potatoes, carob, and dates, and a little nut milk makes a really good ice cream. And it's healthy enough that it could be an entree. So you can do fun things that taste really good and avoid glycation. All right, so that's number one. If we would have only listened, sugar clogs the system. The other thing she says is eating sugar in large amounts is worse than eating meat. But when I go to the potluck, I don't see any meat, but I sure see sugar. So keep that in mind. Meat eating is not good for us. We know that. I mean, you don't have to be an Adventist to know that today. There's so much data out there. But sugar can be more deleterious. Eating largely of sugar is more harmful than eating meat. All right, here's the next one. The balsam of evergreens. This is a really interesting one, and here it is. This is from Ministry of Healing. There are life-giving properties in the balsam of the pine, in the fragrance of the cedar and the fir, and other trees have properties that are health-restoring. And then she was writing about a sanitarium they were building. She said this, In a certain place, preparations were being made to clear the land for the erection of a sanitarium. Light was given that there is health in the fragrance of the pine, the cedar, and the fir. And there are several other kinds of trees that have medicinal properties that are health promoting. Let not such trees be ruthlessly cut down. Better change the site of the building than to cut down these evergreen trees. Well, why would she say that? And you know, that information's been around for a long time, and what do we do with it? Oh, well, we cut the trees. But this has come back into science. Anyone heard of forest bathing? That does not mean walking around nude in the woods. Forest bathing is the habit of taking a leisurely stroll in the woods. And it's been shown to be very health-giving. And they do this a lot in Japan, and the University of Osaka, in conjunction with the Stanford University, did a lot of studies on this. And here's what they found. Forest bathing increases human natural killer cell activity. It increases the number of NK cells and the intracellular levels of anti-cancer proteins. Well, that's interesting. NK cells fight cancer, but they also are the first line of defense against infections that your body has never seen before. Do you remember an infection like that recently? What was it? COVID, right. And so I read this study and I thought, I'm going to put this to work. So my wife and I went out and we got some cedar tips, white cedar, and some balsam fir tips and some pine, and we put them in a pillowcase and we slept with it on our bed between us. Try it. You'll sleep better. And the study done by University of Osaka and also Stanford showed that it increases natural killer cell activity. And they thought, well, maybe it's the walk in the woods. So they had some people walk in the woods. They got better. Their NK cell activity went up. And their epinephrine and norepinephrine and cortisol levels fell. And then they thought, well, maybe it's just the walk. So they had them walk into the city. No benefit from walking in the city. And then they thought, well, maybe we can refine it a little more. So they took the essence of Hinoki cypress, which was one of the evergreen trees, and it has similar properties to the fir, the balsam of the fir, the pine, and the cedar. And they put people in a hotel room and spritzed it into the hotel room at night while they slept. And they found their NK cell activity improved. Their epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol level didn't drop because it isn't that relaxing in a hotel room, but their NK cell activity improved. So, did we get COVID? Not yet. And I would encourage you, if there's another pandemic, go out in your woods and cut some pine and fir and cedar and put it in a pillow and sleep with it. It's fascinating what happens. They found that forest bathing reduces blood pressure and heart rate. It reduces stress hormones. I mentioned those. It reduces salivary and serum cortisol levels that you mentioned. Forest bathing increases the activity of the parasympathetic nerves and reduces the activity of the sympathetic nerves. The parasympathetic is feed and breed, and sympathetic is flight and fright. So we want those, relax, you know. And so that helps, the forest bathing. Forest bathing improves sleep. It increases the level of serum adiponectin. And if serum adiponectin goes up, you lose weight. And it also increased the DHEA. It improved the profile mood test. That is, it reduced anxiety, depression, anger, fatigue, confusion, and increased the score for vigor. Forest bathing also was shown to have preventive effect on COVID-19. let's all go take a walk. I mean, it's amazing what a walk in the woods will do, particularly if you have those trees. But even if you can't get out and take a walk, at least sleep with that on your bed. Fascinating. Any questions about forest bathing? And remember, she told us that, over 100 years ago. Their healing properties. It changes your whole immune system structure. You sleep better, you lose weight better, you're less stressed, all from smelling pine, cedar, and balsam fir. Amazing. It's right in our woods. Yes?
Does that include those essence you buy in the store and put in the candles to melt and they get?
Yeah, to some extent, yes. But I don't want to do that when I can walk out my door and cut the stuff.
Yeah, but sometimes it's easier.
Yeah, anyone here have a Christmas tree?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so next time you have a Christmas tree, if it's a balsam fir, and they almost all are, just stop watering it when Christmas is past, and when it starts to drop its needles, save them. And that's what you make those pillows out of. Balsam fir, dried needles, and it smells good. My wife and I have one on our bed right now. We always sleep with it. And it'll improve your sleep and improve your immune system and help you lose weight. Well, what's not to win with that? So go get one, or make one, or go for a walk in the woods. All right? All right. So the next one is sunlight. Do you need a break? You need a pee break? Go for it. I'm doing fine. I'll have a drink of water, but it's kind of hot in here. Do you have any air conditioning? Or open the windows? Great, open a window.
Drink your water, drink your water.
That's right, purify your system.
While they're taking a break, can I ask a question?
You can ask a question.
I've been hearing too about the importance of hydrating your organs first thing in the morning.
Absolutely. Do it.
So how much water is
Well, it depends. If you're elderly like me, you don't want to overdo it, because if you have a kidney problem, you can get hyponatremia. That's low sodium. That doesn't happen to many people, and the average person can easily hydrate with 3 or 4 cups of water first thing in the morning.
Because I've been starting to do 3 cups.
That's great. Yeah, some fascinating studies on water. I could have included that, but very few people argue about water. Those that have 6 or more glasses of water a day compared to those that have less have a 40% lower risk of heart attack and stroke. Now, if you look at the drugs we give to lower your risk, statins, the maximum dose statin will lower your risk about 35%. Water beats it out. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't lower your cholesterol. Of course you should. Just as important is drink adequate water. You think about that. 30 to 40% reduction just drinking 6 or more glasses of water a day? That's impressive. How much cost saving would we have in this country if we cut stroke and heart attack risk by 40%? It would be incredible if we did that. Yeah, so just drinking enough water.
The water. So I have a hard time stopping to drink the water. After I get the 3 cups in the morning, it's hard for me to get the rest of my water in.
So carry a water bottle with you.
Well, I end up drinking it all at one time. See, I get the 3 cups in the morning, and then so I'll take my 3-cup and I'll drink 3 cups again in the afternoon.
That's fine.
So
That's fine. I mean, sipping it all day long is slightly better, but any way you get it in, I'm happy. And you want me to be happy, right? Yeah. Question here, and then we'll get back to sunlight.
So how dangerous is the coffee I'm drinking?
Okay, Let's talk about
Takes
coffee.
away the water.
Yeah, coffee is a natural diuretic, caffeine is. And so you don't gain hydration from coffee. Coffee has been shown to lengthen life. If you look at the studies, it lengthens life. Why? Because coffee is the major source of antioxidants in the American diet. I wish someone would do a head-to-head trial coffee against kale tea, because I bet kale tea would beat it out. We have very good counsel in the writings of Ellen White about coffee and that it should not be consumed. She's very clear, and I'm happy to share those with you afterwards. But there are some benefits to coffee, no question. At the price of what is the question? And so I don't recommend coffee at all. You know what the number one commodity in the world is? Oil. Oil. Number two is coffee. Yeah. That tells you something about our world, that we are all so addicted to coffee. Yeah.
I would make a comment on that. I got a problem with coffee too. I probably work too much, but you plan your day around your coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and boy, if you really have to plan it, because if you miss 8 hours of it, you pay for it.
Yeah.
So
What
if you
coffee
really
does
think-
is it borrows energy from tomorrow for today. And as you drink it throughout your life, you go further and further in debt. I get up in the morning just fine without it. I remember the last time I had coffee, I had worked all day, and it was in the evening. I got word that my stepmom had died, and I wanted to get to Maryland to be with my dad. So I got all my family in the car, and we left about 6 in the evening. And I drove all night to Maryland. And one rest stop, I was feeling a little dozy, and so I had a cup of coffee. My kids made me promise I would never do that again. They said I talked nonstop for yeah, because I wasn't used to it. And I was just, I had no problems falling asleep. If you use coffee as a medication, like once in a lifetime, okay. But be careful. Don't go into progressive debt. It's not a good idea with coffee or money.
What about tea?
Same. Yeah. All right. There are some benefits to green tea as well, but I want to see kale tea. I bet it'd beat them all. Her turn.
How do you tell if you talked about becoming hyponatremic? I'm a water addict. And so my son is concerned that I'll become hyponatremic. So how do you tell if you're getting too much water?
2 ways. If you stand up and get really lightheaded and feel like you're going to pass out, that can be a sign of hyponatremia. There's a condition called psychogenic polydipsia. That's where you're crazy and you think you're dirty inside, and so you drink and drink and drink. They get hyponatremic and they stand up and pass out because their blood pressure drops too low. But the best way to tell is to get your blood checked. Yeah, I doubt that you are. You look fairly healthy.
Well, when
I don't know
crave
about
salt,
him,
I
but
figure I need some more.
yeah. And people say restrict salt for your blood pressure. That's important. But if you drink enough water, it's not that important, because salt is a natural diuretic. It washes, water is a natural diuretic. It washes salt out of your body. So,
If you don't mind, one more question.
one more question.
One way to step away from coffee, take a step away from coffee, is to brew cacao, but then you're getting theobromine. Is it? Same.
Chocolate is a little better, or a little less worse for you than coffee. But just go through withdrawal and suffer. But don't do it while I'm around. Okay. Sunlight. Is sunlight good for you or bad for you?
If you listen,
Yeah, good and
Depends on
bad.
who you're looking
Too
to.
much of it.
if you listen to this lady, she'll tell you the 8 laws of health.
Okay, so let's talk about sunlight. First, a quote. Make it a habit not to sit up after 9 o'clock. Every light should be extinguished. This turning night into day is a wretched, health-destroying habit, and this reading much by brain workers up to the sleeping hours is very injurious to health. It calls the blood to the brain, and then there's restlessness and wakefulness, and the precious sleep that should rest the body does not come when desired. So, do we ever do that, turning night into day? You know, before the invention of the electric light bulb, how much did the average American sleep a night? 10 hours, exactly. Then we got to 1950, and there was the invention of television in the 50s. And the average American then was getting 8 hours. And now the average American gets about 6 to 6.5 because we have these phones and whatnot, and and we don't get enough sleep, and we turn night into day and day into night. Here's another one. The sun is the Lord's doctor. There is healing in its beams. Faith and works are to be combined. Do all that you can to obtain the sunshine of the first morning hours, and then ask the Lord to bless the means you have taken to secure cleanliness, pure air, and daily sunshine. The feeble one should press out into the sunshine as earnestly and naturally as do the shaded plants and vines. The pale, sickly grain blade that has struggled up out of the cold of early spring puts out a natural, healthy, deep green after enjoying for a few days the health and life-giving rays of the sun. Go out into the light and warmth of the glorious sun, you pale, sickly ones, and share with the vegetation its life-giving, health-dealing power. Isn't that fun? How prevalent is the habit of turning night into day and day into night? We should be up with the singing birds, stirring when all nature is awake. There's a few others. But, so this is really interesting. I heard a presentation on NPR, maybe some of you did. There was a dermatologist from Edinburgh and a dermatologist from Australia talking about sunshine and skin cancer and how dermatologists say what? Don't go out in the sun. And they said that's all bunk. That's a good word. There are a few others that come to mind. In America today, there are about 2,000 people that die of squamous cell carcinoma of the skin. You know about that, Rodney? Look at his ears. He's had squamous cells cut off his ears, and he's got a big scar here. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, people that get squamous cell of the skin and basal cell tend to live longer than those that don't. So we're going to have to put up with Rodney for a while. Yeah. And about 2,000 people a year die of that. And they estimate that the amount of sun that causes those 2,000 deaths prevents about 138,000 cases of prostate, breast, and colon cancer. Because that sunshine is protective against internal cancers. They did a study in Scandinavia where they looked at women that got breast cancer and the time of year, and those that got breast cancer in the spring and then got sun all summer long, lived longer than those that got breast cancer in the fall. Sunshine is helpful. Sunshine increases nitric oxide production. I mentioned that earlier. It lowers blood pressure. and it relaxes you. Now, there's ultraviolet light that we get during the middle part of the day, right? And that gives us our vitamin D. It also gives us sunburn and inflammation. What does she say? Go out into the sunshine early in the day. Well, what do you get early in the day? Well, you get near infrared and infrared light early in the day, and that is healing and protective. And you get that at the end of the day too, around sunset. You get a lot of that. Now, isn't that interesting that God would arrange things so you get the healing rays of the sun, then you get the quote bad, but it gives us vitamin D, and then you get the healing again? If you look at men that work on an aircraft carrier, the ones that work on deck have less melanoma, which is not a good cancer to get on the skin, and squamous and basal cell than the ones that work below deck. How's that? They get the early, and they get the late, and they get what's in the middle. So I'm all for sunbathing as long as you get it early and late. And that's very interesting. How many of you have heard of melatonin? Where is it made?
Your sleep.
In your brain, in the pineal gland when you sleep. What percentage of the total body melatonin is made in the brain? 10%. That's all. The rest is made in the mitochondria under the influence of infrared and near-infrared light. And melatonin is one of the most potent antioxidants in the body. And it's made in the mitochondria, which is very interesting. The mitochondria is the stove of the body, if you will, or the furnace of the body. That's where you generate the energy to run the body. But there's a lot of inflammation, burning that goes on in the mitochondria. And we're designed so that we make antioxidants to keep that burn from hurting us if we get enough infrared and near-infrared sunshine. So people that get more sunshine have more melatonin and less inflammation. I thought sun was inflammatory. Yes, it is in the middle of the day if you get too much all at once. But go out into the sunlight, you pale, sickly ones, and you'll really get the benefit, especially if you get it early in the day. That's the most important time. Go out in your garden early in the day and get that red and, the near-infrared and infrared light. It is so healthy. And, if you look back at COVID, it's really interesting. It was there, but not many people were dying of it as long as it was summer. And we thought, well, it must be vitamin D. So we started supplementing vitamin D. Didn't help at all. It was because near-infrared is anti-inflammatory. And the problem with COVID is we got overwhelming inflammation. We thought that when COVID hit Africa, it would wipe out the population. It had very little effect. Why? They get more sun than we do. Yeah. Another interesting thing is in Finland, they didn't have as much problem. Why? Saunas. And you do get infrared and near-infrared from infrared saunas. You also get it from your fireplace. And so if you're up here in the winter and you can't get sunshine and can't afford to travel south, just open the doors for that or get it, look through the glass. You get infrared right through the glass and get that infrared, and that'll give you melatonin too. That you can get it that way. Anytime you feel the warmth from the sun, you're getting the infrared and near-infrared rays. So it's different than ultraviolet. You can sit in front of your window, and if you're feeling the warmth, you're getting those rays of light. Interestingly, they've done studies in hospitals, and the average length of stay is almost a day shorter in the people whose bed is by the window than those who isn't. So whatever you do when you go to the hospital, say, I'm not coming in here unless you put my bed by the window. Well, I don't know that you can do that, but you have a definitely lower length of stay and lower mortality if you're by the window than if you're not. Why? Light. Light. It's so very important. So go out into the sunshine, you poor sickly ones. Any questions on that? It's fascinating. And we've had this information for how long? It's really, really important for those of us in this northern climate. I would encourage you, if you can afford it, to consider a vacation in the sun in December before it's real expensive. If you wait until after the holidays, then it gets very expensive. But December is the darkest month. So head south and get some sunshine, and you'll do better, and you'll have less infection and less cancer, and it's not a bad way to spend your money. Questions? You all tired, or do you want one more?
Keep going.
One more, okay. Let me see where I was. That was sunlight. Oh, there's a whole lot more. You know that they've done studies in colleges. If the classroom has natural light, like these windows here, the test scores are all higher than if they're in a basement room. Same teacher, same class, 6 years consecutively they did this. Every time they're in the basement, scores go down. If they're in natural light, their scores go up. Sunlight and cholesterol. Sunlight lowers cholesterol and lowers your risk of heart disease. So go for it by all means. Okay, one more. Meal frequency. Well, what does Ellen White say about how often we should eat? She says don't eat more than every 4.5 to 5 hours. I mean, and what else does she say? 2 meals a day are better for most of us than 3, okay? Not for everybody, but it's a general rule. And the way you can tell is really simple. If you look down and you can't see your belt buckle, you don't need 3. It's really simple. Yeah. Okay. There, I can have a third meal. So they've done studies on meal frequency and colon cancer, and this is what they found. This was cancer research, published in Cancer Research a few years ago. Compared with 2 meals per day, 3 meals per day increase the risk of colon cancer by 40%. And 4 meals a day increase the risk of colon cancer by 90%. That didn't mean you have a 90% chance of getting it. It means the relative risk goes up 90%. That's still impressive.
Okay, so what about all these people that say we're supposed to take, small, like 6
Great
meals a
question.
day?
Yeah, that's really good. And that's just what a cow does. And how many stomachs does a cow have?
2. Right.
No, they like 3
I
or
don't
4.
know.
Yeah, they got more than you and I.
Yeah.
And what else do they do?
Chew the
Chew
fat.
their cud.
They go, and then they chew it again. Do you want to do that?
No.
No, it causes esophageal cancer. They did a study in nurses. They gave them the usual American breakfast, coffee and a donut. And then mid-morning, they were a little bit hungry, so they gave them a snack. At lunchtime, they weren't very hungry because they just had a snack, so they didn't eat a very big meal. Mid-afternoon, they were a little bit hungry, so they gave them a snack. And then they hadn't eaten properly all day, so they let them have the usual American big supper. And then they pumped their stomachs out. And what'd they find? Remnants of breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, and supper. What would that be like? Rotten.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. Your stomach is like a washing machine. It has to go through a cycle, and it just restarts the cycle if you add something more, and the food, instead of digesting, rots. That's one of the reasons why colon cancer risk goes up so much with that 4th meal added. Every time you eat, you secrete bile to help digest, and bile causes problems in the large intestine. particularly if it isn't absorbed with fiber. And then colon cancer risk goes up. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Inspiration's not wrong. And grazing is good for cows, but it doesn't suit our alimentary tract. We're not made to eat that way. No.
I have a friend that he usually eats one meal a day, and he's of course going through cancer treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Does that have anything to do with?
Well, good question. Going that low doesn't lower risk of colon cancer. You'd think, well, maybe going lower helps. And what time does he eat it?
Usually at night.
Yeah, there's good studies that show if you give people the exact same calories, same food, same calories, you give it at breakfast and lunch, they lose weight. You give it at lunch and supper, they gain weight. Same calories, same food, different timing. Yeah, we're designed to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper. If you're going to have supper, a piece of fruit. Ideally, your stomach should be empty when you go to bed. Anyone heard of gastroesophageal reflux? Yeah. Dreadful thing. I've lost 2 patients in the last year to esophageal cancer from chronic reflux. And I knew both of them had reflux, and we were treating it maximum, and they were getting scoped every 3 years, all this. They still got it. And that's one of the problems with coffee. Coffee causes reflux.
Yeah.
Hands down, always does. So does tea, any caffeinated beverage. Why? Because it relaxes the sphincter at the bottom of the esophagus. And then acid, which doesn't bother the stomach normally, comes up and burns the esophagus. Causes all manner of problems. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Well, there's something to think about. I could go on, but any other questions, and then we'll call it a day. We've been going for an hour and a half.
So how many meals a day should we eat?
Ideally, you'll eat a good breakfast and a good midday meal to early afternoon, and then if you have anything for supper, it should be light, like a mango. There you go, from Peru.
Oh, yeah.
A mango, yeah. Or something very light and delicious. You know, one thing that's helpful when we're eating is to eat more slowly, because you don't get much pleasure from your food after it passes here, do you?
No.
And you know, I struggle with eating fast, and you know, it tastes so good, and you just keep eating. Where if you slow down, you can eat less and enjoy it more. And if you don't have to fix supper and you don't have to clean up after supper, and you just sit there at the table and talk and visit, if you're only having a mango, what kind of a mess does that make? Well, a little bit, because they're really juicy, or a piece of fruit, but not much. And so we have more time for family, and mama can relax, or daddy if he's doing the cooking. You can have more time together. And that's really what makes life worth living, isn't it? It's time with dear people. It's not the busyness that we do. You know, I don't know about you, but I find that I have to struggle. I'm more of a human doing than a human being. Have you noticed that? We need to relax a little more and be a real human being rather than a human doing. Well, think about those things. We've been given a tremendous gift in the writings of Ellen White. You don't have to be an Adventist to appreciate them. T. Colin Campbell certainly isn't, and he spoke very highly of them. I'd encourage you to get the book Ministry of Healing. It's really good and balanced, wonderful book. You can't go wrong with that. Yeah. Let's have prayer and then we'll close. Our Father, we're so thankful that you love us, that you've given us a wealth of information and science and inspiration. that correlates so well with what we need to do to be healthy, to have pure bodies and minds so that we can enjoy life to the fullest. Thank you for your gracious gift. In Jesus' name, amen.